Lovely.
Right. Good stuff. Should we get going?
I think so.
It is 4 o'clock, so the German in me wants to, be on time.
Well, perfect. I mean, I'm very happy to make a start, and obviously there'll be a few minutes in the setup, so if folks start coming in as I can see them all drifting, and that'll be okay.
Okay, cool stuff. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time out of what is quite a chilly day here in Joburg, and probably from around the country. You guys started off with yesterday. It's rather cold in Joey's today. I think we kicked it off at about 10 degrees this morning, and that was when I was attempting a bike ride, but that definitely did not happen once I faced what it really was like outside. Just a brief introduction. My name is Lisa Illingworth, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Future-Proof South Africa. We focus specifically on entrepreneurship education into schools and empowering teachers, kids, and parents to be able to develop young entrepreneurs from a very early age. We've brought along Craig Carolan, who, apart from just being a firm friend after all of this, is probably one of the foremost thinkers around positive education in South Africa, and is the kind of person that we want to be talking to on the eve of heading back into schools. And I know that comes with a little bit of, sorry, Ambikesh, we just want you to mute your mic, thanks. Is that it comes with a lot of anxiety, and it comes with a lot of unknowns, because nobody's navigated this kind of playing field before. So how do we navigate something that we've never done before? How do we provide an environment for our students, for our teachers, for our parents that provide some level of safety and comfort? And that's why we brought Craig along. Craig, being a headmaster previously, as well as being a psychologist, has a lot of expertise in the trenches, as you guys are. And so for school leaders and for management teams, how to create an environment that is going to support positive growth and positive well-being in school environments coming out of a time of high uncertainty. And this is a burning issue for a lot more than just you here. And so we will make this recording available after this session. So Craig, I'm going to hand over the reins or the mic to you. If you guys can just keep your mics muted during the sessions. There is a chat function on Zoom, so if you have a look on your screens that are coming up, it will give you at the bottom of the screen a chat function. If you've got any questions that you want to raise through the session, pop them into the chat function as well, and we'll take kind of intermittent breaks right the way through for Craig to be able to address those. And then, yeah, after the session, we will email you with a link. We'll upload it to YouTube as well as to the cloud, and we'll email you with those links, and you'll be able to reach those. Now, Craig, I'm going to leave it up to you. I did not give your introduction justice whatsoever, so you can give us a little bit more about who you are and what you're about.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. And I want to, first of all, thank you from all of us, myself as well as all the delegates, who are attending today. Just thank you so much for putting this together, because I think, without you being proactive around this, and I think the timing has been impeccable. We didn't know exactly when we were going to go back, and now we know that it's next week for most, for all the teachers and of course for a couple of grades. So I think the timing of this is hopefully going to be very useful for all of you. And certainly, today is an interactive session. As much as you're not necessarily going to talk, at least you'll have the opportunity to throw up questions. So as Lisa said, I'm from Intrinsic Education. My name's Craig Carolan. Many of you who are on here will know me already from either from school, or those of you who are members of Sahisa will know me from there. Some of you from Round Square. But my kind of background was always in positive psychology, and of course education. And the nice thing is that, as you will all know, it's a really nice marriage, those two things. So today is really about sharing thoughts. Hopefully it'll give you as leaders an opportunity to reflect on what the next couple of months might look like. And we know, we're not being naive. We know we're going into a time of uncertainty, of anxiety. No matter how prepared we are, we don't know what to expect. And I think what we're hopefully going to talk about today is a little bit of a model where we can keep drawing ourselves back to this model, keep reflecting on what is really important at this time, and to have a kind of touchstone to keep going back to, because we are going to be throwing a few curveballs in the next couple of months. We are going to be having to look after the wellness of ourselves, first and foremost, of our staff and of our students. So, and of course, that's our entire community. So hopefully we'll be able to just share a few ideas on how we can do that. So before we start, just as Lisa has said, if we could just make sure our mics stay muted, please do put any questions you have up on there. Lisa will field those and feed them back into us. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity at the end just to have a short Q&A. Please do introduce yourself there as well, because of course the rest of the delegates can see that, and it's nice to see who is actually on the webinar today. Please do take notes. One of the things I'm having to speak quite generically around a lot of these topics because of the fact that there are so many of us from so many different areas. And the idea is really to think about your school, your own environment, and to think about how what I'm introducing to you can be plugged into your school. Because of course you have a unique environment. We all have our strengths that we want to play to over this time. So it's really about reflecting about your personal journey and then your organizational journey. So I think I'll start with a positioning statement, because I think this is really critical for us. We need to make sure that we are starting on the front foot as schools. And I love this quote. This quote actually comes from, it's from an Australian guy. His name's Matthew White, and he is a positive psychologist, positive education. He heads up the PosEd section of IPA, which is the International Positive Psychology Association. And he says, as we return, schools can provide places of regeneration and hope. And I just love that, because we know that our children and our families are really in it's a massively anxious time for us, a massively anxious space. And although we are quite nervous about going back to school, I think if we frame it in a way where we know that our schools can be places of regeneration and hope, I think it really frames it in a nice positive way for us. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about our current context, just kind of where are we, exactly where are we in terms of our physical and our cognitive space. And then I'll start talking about how we can frame this whole idea of our return to school protocol, as it's being called, our return to school strategy, and what the psychosocial aspect of that could look like for you. To help us do that, we're going to look at two aspects. We're going to look at the macro version, and this is you as the strategist taking a step back and looking at the strategy of what it might look like. And then we're going to drill down a little bit more, and we're going to have a micro view where we look at the PERMA model, which is Martin Seligman's positive psychology model, a really nice framework which can give a nice clear way of looking at positive psychology as an intervention that can help you with your psychosocial support for your staff. And then obviously within that model, we'll look at a few practical ways that we could possibly plug them in, and hopefully that'll give you some thought as to what it might look like in your school. So to start off with, and just to get you all practicing a little bit on this model, what I'd like you to do is, if you have a look, if you scroll to the top of your screen, you will see that there is a bar at the top. And you will notice that if you go along, there is an annotate button. What I would like you to do is to click on that, and it opens up another little bar, and there's a stamp icon here. And what I'd like you to do is to go on, have a look at those 5 questions, and just stamp choose one stamp and choose which of those, what would you like to the most? What would you like to get out of today's little workshop? Is it learning ways to manage your own stress? Is it learning ways to support your staff, learn a little bit about PosEd? Is it to build a return to school psychosocial plan? Learn to help students manage stress? Which is the one that you would like to? So just put your stamp on there, choose a stamp, choose a color, and then let's see what we get to. Right, lots learning to support our staff. I love the fact so many of you saying you want to help your students, because we'll talk a bit about that. Lovely. Awesome. Right, so a really nice even spread popping up on the screen, which is really good, like that. All right, you have another 10 seconds to get your vote in. I'm going to make sure I save that screen. Awesome. Oops, I'm even putting a stamp in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so folks, the good news about this workshop is that hopefully, no matter where you put your stamp, hopefully you will find the answers to the questions that you are hoping to get to today. So we are going to look at ways to manage our own stress. We're going to look at building the psychosocial plan, which of course will help your staff in terms of managing their own stress and how they can help the students. And of course, we're going to use a positive education model. So the idea is that by the end of this, we should be able to really have touched on all of those 5 areas. So, whoopsie, I've got to go back and get rid of otherwise we're going to have those up there the whole time. Okay, so the first thing we need to look at is we need to understand where we are right now in terms of the physiology and the psychology of where we are, where our students are, and where our staff are when we are stepping back into this. We know that the last 60 days have been massively stressful on many levels. Your schools have, not just coping with the whole pandemic, the thinking around the pandemic, but also us having to try and get our schools online. Now we're going to be looking at thinking about how do we get our schools back in the building, at the same time juggling that whole thing of some online, some offline. Are we at the bottom of the curve? Are we on the top? Have we gone through the top? There's so many different things that are making us anxious. So we need to understand how the stress response works so that we are in a position where we can deactivate that stress response as well as we can. So for us as leaders, we need to ensure that, number one, and I know many of you will know this model. So for those who do, I apologize for repeating it, but I think it is critical. And also when we go back, it's critical that our teachers understand this model so that they can recognize this in themselves and they can recognize this in their students when they come back. So we need to understand what the stress response looks like. And the stress response, and many will have heard the whole idea of fight, flight, freeze. And what happens is when we are faced with a stressor, we have 2 parts of our stress response which are activated. We have the HPA axis, which is our hypothalamus, which then activates the pituitary gland, which activates the adrenal cortex, which releases cortisol into our body. And the cortisol is an anti-inflammatory, which kind of limits pain. So if we're fighting a tiger or a lion or whatever it is, we obviously feel less pain. And also we have the glucose that's then pumped into our body to get our muscles to work properly. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is also activated. And this is that it kind of switches on our adrenal medulla, which pumps adrenaline into our body. Now, of course, that's great if we have a short-term stressor. And because, of course, when our system is activated, it increases, the blood through the body. We're able to breathe, we breathe deeper. It moves blood away from from our brain. It moves blood away from our digestive system because it goes to the muscles for us to be active. So all those things that happen are great if we're facing a short-term stressor. But when we are facing a chronic stressor like the pandemic, like the concern, constant bombardment of social media, fake news, everything that's been happening, kids trying to cope with being, taught at home, parents, trying to homeschool, all these different things that are leading to, for most people, probably the most heightened state of anxiety they've ever been under in terms of chronic stressor. So the problem with that, of course, is that we go through this general adaptation syndrome. We go through the stages, and we move into resistance stage and exhaustion stage, which is this area where we go into adrenal fatigue. So, normally we would be in this first good health homeostasis, and then we obviously get the stress response activated, which is the alarm stage. But of course, for us, it doesn't get switched off. What's happening at the moment, and certainly for the foreseeable future, we are going to be in this resistance. And if we are not able to kind of get ourselves back into some sense of homeostasis, we're going to move into exhaustion phase. And it's important that we understand what happens there. So in this exhaustion stage, or even in resistance stage, we're in a position where our cognitive function is narrowed. So critically for us as teachers and as leaders, we need to understand that our kids and our teachers are not going to be functioning cognitively at 100%. So here we are, bringing our kids back, having had 60 days away from school, saying we need to catch up all this work, we're all behind, and we're probably in a position where we are least equipped cognitively. Our students are least equipped cognitively to cope with that. And we need to be aware of that. We need to understand that they are not going to be, they are going to be anxious, and therefore it is going to be very difficult for them to learn. So we need to understand how we can minimize that so we can get them into a stage where they can be cognitively better. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I don't want to give too much away, but let's move on. So that's where we are. We're kind of in the state of anxiety. We're moving in kind of this resistance and exhaustion phase. So we need to know that. So our plan for today is to look at, like I said, we're going to look at this at the macro level, the strategy level of what can we put in place as school leaders. And then we're going to look at the micro level. Okay, so if this is our plan, what are the little bits and pieces that fit into that plan to ensure that we're putting our staff and our students in the best possible position to cope with the next, say, 6 months. And then the last bit here is this monitoring and reflecting, which is something that we'll talk about, and that is going to be something that's ongoing. So the first thing we look at is this idea of a healthy organization, and say, well, this comes from Patrick Lencioni's work, which is around establishing a healthy organization model. And normally we ask, in this healthy organization, we ask 6 questions. Why do we exist? What do we do? How do we succeed? What's most important now? Who must do what? And how do we behave? And for us, at this moment, as leaders, we should be looking at the last 3 questions. And we should be asking ourselves, what is most important now? And when I say this, this is our rallying cry. This is us looking at our strategy. And for us, our strategy now should be for the next 3 to 6 months. Yes, we might have a 3-year plan. We might have a 5-year plan as schools that we've built with our boards. But for us, the critical aspect is, how are we going to ensure that we are in a healthy position between now and the end of the year? So probably 6 months. What is our plan? What is most important in these next 6 months? Once we know what our rallying cry is, we then need to designate as to who must do what. What is your role? Do you have a champion who is going to head up your psychosocial support? If so, what is their role? What is the role of the teachers? What is the role of each person in your school? And we want to create a lot of clarity around that. And then what are the behaviors that go with this? Now, I'm going to talk quite a lot about behavior in the next few slides, because I think it is critical that us as leaders are role modeling the behaviors we want from our students. So we need to ensure, as anxious as we are, we need to be trying to operate in a place where we're not kind of transferring our anxiety onto our staff, and our staff not transferring that anxiety onto the students. So we're going to look at positive psychology and how that kind of can be used as a model. And before we do that, I think it's important that we understand what positive psychology is. It was, positive psychology as a practice has been around for a long time, but the actual, when it came into kind of being a concrete thing, was Martin Seligman, who at that stage was nominated as the chair of the American Psychological Association. It's been around probably for around 25 or so years, and it really is becoming mainstream. But the thing about positive psychology is it's important that we understand that it is a rigorous science. This is not pop psychology. And sometimes people go, oh, positive psychology is all fluffy. It isn't at all. It is rigorous, and it's not just about the positive, it's about the negative as well. And it's about us understanding both sides of this, of this model. So positive psychology in itself is the study of well-being, and it's the study of flourishing. So what we want to do is we want to today look at what does flourishing look like and what does well-being look like. We know we're in a state of anxiety at the moment. How can we ensure that we are trying to move our staff as far along this continuum as we physically can under the circumstances? And there are a couple of really nice little practical exercises that we'll look at. So just some of the supporting research that has been, that really strongly supports how we can use positive psychology in situations that have been quite dire. We're trying to find situations that are similar to what we're going through now. Two major research areas that have happened in the past that support this was the first one done by Barbara Fredrickson after 9/11. And it was this whole idea of who are the people who came out of 9/11, despite the fact that they were personally involved in something. Either they lost someone in the attacks, or they were in the buildings. And there was research done on looking at who are the ones that came out a year later, who were the folk who had managed to still be emotionally in a place of well-being. And there were two major things that showed up. The first was that they thought of good things, so they had positive emotions. They were always thinking about either how lucky they were, how blessed they were to still be safe. And the second thing they had was this whole idea of social connection. They had a very strong support network around them, which enabled them to be in a position of well-being. So those two things already are very strong indicators for us as to what we should be trying to put in place as we move into this new kind of, the new normal as it's being called. On that research that was done, Barbara Fredrickson found that the folk who succeeded in being in a position of well-being had a positivity ratio of 3-to-1, which is an interesting statistic. It's not 3 positive emotions to 1 negative emotions, because the bad news is that negative emotions are way more powerful than positive emotions. And they all kind of have a various ratio. So out of interest sake, love is a very powerful positive emotion. It's probably the most positive emotion. But so the ratio of 3-to-1 was not 3 positive emotions to 1 negative. It more around 5-to-1. But that was the kind of ratio that we're looking at. So we're trying to get our folk to be in this whole kind of above the 3-to-1 positivity ratio. And we'll talk about how we can do that. So the second bit of research was around this bereavement, and the idea that folk who, when they lost someone close to them, who a year later were able to be flourishing, they were people who thought about the positive aspects of the person they had lost, rather than the grieving itself. So two very powerful pieces of research that point to why positive emotion is so important in times of adversity. So key questions for us to consider as we move through this model. First of all, is on a macro level for you as a leader, what is your socio-psychological return to school strategy going to look like? So by the end of this, I would love you to have an idea as to exactly what it is that you're going to put into place, concrete something that you're going to put into place when you are, and it doesn't have to be by Monday, but certainly over the next couple of weeks, probably by the end of next week, you should have an idea and you should have had a conversation with your staff. What avenue do teachers have at the moment to communicate how they are feeling? Sometimes we are so worried about making sure that we've got the protective equipment in place and that our schools are going to be sanitized and that the staff are coming back and we're getting our school fees in and all these things that we forget to ask our teachers how they're feeling and to ask them whether they feel secure or they feel safe. So what avenue are you giving to your teachers to ensure that they've got an outlet to have that to be vulnerable, to have a conversation? And then who is your lead or go-to person who's going to oversee this? I would strongly suggest it isn't you, because you have so many other things on your plate. You are the person who's going to pull this together. Yes, this lead or go-to person needs to report directly to you, but I would suggest that you have someone who is close to you, and many of you who are going to be the lead person are actually on this call at the moment. I know who you are, but you need to have a direct line to your head of school so that you can keep them informed as to how people are doing. And then for me at a macro level, probably the most important thing is how are you going to explicitly communicate your strategy to your school community? Because this is your measurable. In December, people are going to look back and they're going to measure you. You need to ensure that you've explicitly communicated your strategy so that you're measured by your strategy, not by what folk think the strategy is. And then the thing we're going to talk about a lot on this talk is the whole idea of what are the micro side of things? What are the key questions? What are the key actions under each of the PERMA model aspects, the pillars? Each answer is going to be unique to your school. So you need to be jotting down what those are. Obviously, you'll have this to go over again. And to help you to try and tease that out, we're going to give you some practical examples. So this model is the PERMA model. Like I said, Martin Seligman, it's fairly new in psychology terms, 2011, it was first launched, and you will notice that it's called the PERMA model, but there's a V on there. And this is the latest sort of addition, which is the vitality piece, the health piece. So sometimes you'll see it called the PERMA H, sometimes PERMA V. Most people would call it the PERMA model, but we know that we've added this vitality piece into it. And today what we're going to talk about is how you can use this model to put explicit actions in place that will help you develop your psychosocial plan, that will make them nice and measurable, nice and practical, and you can communicate them nice and clearly to your community. I'm not going to go through each of the branches now because we're going to go through them bit by bit. Lisa, I'm going to rely on you if there are any pertinent questions, just to stop me. And I know this is a one-way kind of thing at the moment. I feel like I'm just talking, which is very, very difficult not having the interaction, as you'll all know, sure, with your teaching. So if there are any questions that need to be asked, please just do jump in, okay?
Yeah, sure. I'm keeping an eye on the chat as we go. So if you have any questions for Craig, pop them onto the chat and then I'll just keep flagging them for him. So happy to do that.
Thank you. So the first part of the PERMA model is the P, which is positive emotions. And these are the really powerful things that we've spoken about in that research that Barbara Fredrickson did. And our idea is to try and get our students and our staff to understand the positive spiral of emotion. The bad news is that it is almost impossible for us to be in a state of neutrality when it comes to emotion. We are either on a downward spiral or we are on an upward spiral. Now, you'll know this as adults. You'll know you know that whole thing of you're either up or you're down. It's very, very difficult to kind of just be on a even keel. So we're either feeling energized and in a positive place, or we kind of feeling like we're getting dragged down. And that could be by all the, the negative stuff we're hearing on the news, or being fatigued, or because we're anxious, we're not sleeping properly, which is, of course, one of the physical kind of outputs of being in stress. And so what we want to do as school leaders is deliberately get our teachers, and in so doing our students, to get onto the positive spiral of emotion. Barbara Fredrickson introduced the model of broaden and build, which is up here. And it's this whole idea that if we can get ourselves into a positive emotion, you imagine a flower opening in the sun. When we are in an anxious state, our cognitive faculties close down. Positive emotions allow our frontal cortex to open up and be open to, to open up. So therefore, we are now more open to we can learn better, we can take on, more information. And so what we're trying to do is get ourselves into this positive spiral. Now, the good news is when we start getting onto a positive spiral, it becomes so much easier to remain on this. And it's called broaden and build for a reason. So by having novel positive thoughts, we then start opening ourselves up to other novel positive thoughts, which allow us to start building resources. And the 10 positive, most powerful emotions that we can experience are those 10 that I've put down there: pride, interest, hope, amusement, awe, joy, gratitude, inspiration, serenity, and most importantly, love. That's the most powerful one. Now, the interest of these emotions is that for each of them, there are 3 things that happen. The first part is the appraisal. So when we feel pride, we get this sense, let's use hope, because hope's quite relevant to us now in this thing. What we want to do is we want to create a sense of hope in our schools. So the appraisal of when we first feel hope is that we yearn for something better. So this is the appraisal. We have a negative experience, so we're fearing the worst, but we're yearning for this better thing. The tendency when we experience hope is for us to be inventive. We start thinking of solutions. And the output of hope is that we become more resilient. So for each of these 10 emotions, and I'll share this with you, I have a little sheet, and those of you, if you're looking at my video, you will see I have a card, and for the 10 emotions, what I will do is I will ensure that I send you this so that you can get your teachers to start understanding when you do this work with them, that there's an appraisal for a positive emotion, there's a tendency, and there's an outcome, as there are for negative emotions as well. So the question I want to ask you is, what are the positive emotions that you feel are most relevant and easy to implement at your school? So I'm going to use the example, and I don't know if Trevor Harbottle from Hermannsburg is on here. I know there are a couple of staff from Hermannsburg School who are here, who are part of their team that are building their psychosocial response. And what we did as a staff, I've been working with them, what we did as a staff is we sat down and we said, what are the positive emotions we are trying to be quite explicit about building in our school? And we came up with four emotions that we felt were most powerful. And so what we did then is we said, right, how can we practically build these emotions at our school? Gratitude was the one that was the top of the pile. So how can we practice gratitude? So as an example, when we come back, we can talk to our kids about what are you most grateful for. What we've done with the staff is we started practicing putting in place a little gratitude journal. At the start of the day or at the end of the day, what are the 3 things I'm most grateful for? And just jotting them down. That's a really simple exercise, but what it does, if you look at the model, is that it creates a novel thought of positive thing and switches you onto the positive spiral. So what are the things you can implement at your school? Is it around gratitude, hope, really powerful ones, inspiration? Are there things happening in your community that that can inspire you? Now we're going to talk a little bit more, because this is just the introduction to the positive emotions. We'll talk a little bit more around these when we get to the meaning part of it.
Sorry, Craig, I just want to jump in here quickly. Geraldine's got a question for you. She says, how do we attempt to balance the science, common sense, and emotions or herd hysteria that's obviously coming into the environment? If pupils contract COVID-19 within the first few days of returning to school, how do we manage that? And maybe in terms of looking at the positive emotions, getting people onto the positive spiral, which is obviously where we want people to go. How do we do that? So managing all of those things that are coming in, and then moving people from the negative, which is the easier one to get into, but into the positive spiral.
Yeah. So Geraldine, it's a really good question, and my answer is probably not going to be what you want to hear. We are in this whole talk is around how can we put in a blocker when we need to, which I'm afraid is going to have to be pretty much all the time. And what we are going to have to do as staff, and the reason, so my whole thing here is about, we need to be explicit about trying to create moments of positivity as often as we can. It would be naive of us to say we're not going to have heaps and heaps of negativity. What I'm hoping is that if we are being explicit around introducing positive moments, we at least are going to hide. We're just going to get people spiraling, at pace into this negative thing. So what can we do? We just have to keep trying to bring in positivity. We've got to keep reminding folk that there's so much, no matter who we are, no matter what happens, there's so much for us to be thankful for. There's pride in our school environment. There's pride in the people. There is hope that we are going to come out the other side, and that's got to be our focus. Because if we aren't explicit around creating these moments of positive focus, we run the risk of our communities becoming drowned in negativity. So, is there going to be negativity? Yes, absolutely, there will be. But we are going to try and work to kind of counterbalance that, I suppose. So our role is one of counterbalance as much as we can, rather than saying, we're going to be able to get rid of negativity. We would be naive to say that. And I know that hasn't answered your question fully, but I hope that gives you some kind of, frames that, I wish I could say, this is the silver bullet. It would change things. All I'm hoping is that by being explicit, we can slow down the times when people are in despair, and we can make the most of those times when we're in a lull, and we can get people onto a bit of a positive spiral for the next 6 months. And hopefully it creates great habits for people moving forward.
Yeah, I think what you were mentioning now, Craig, about rewiring. So, this is the opportunity to rewire the response, and rewire that towards positivity, rewire the habits that we've been speaking about, to be able to do that. So it is coming. There is going to be that anxiety that is coming, but how do we start putting in place positive habits, rewiring our neural pathways towards positive responses?
Absolutely right. And it's a habit. We have to form this habit, and we are, as human beings, we are predisposed to negative thinking. We've had to be, because it's that survival mode. We think negatively because we need to survive. So we are predisposed to the negative spiral, hence why the negative emotions are 3 times more powerful. So we need to ensure that we are getting ourselves into the positive thinking habit. And it's tough. It's hard. It's not easy. And of course, negativity, that really feeds into this idea that negativity is necessary. You can never create resilience if you aren't exposed to negativity, if you aren't exposed to the downside. So when we come out the other side of COVID, we will be way more resilient than when we went in. because we will have had a lot of practice in dealing with adversity. So we must be careful to say, oh, we must just be happy and la-di-da and everything's about positivity, because that's not true. That 3-to-1 ratio is in place for a very good reason, because, and I love this analogy of a sailboat. That whole idea of that, you know, the positivity is the sail that catches the wind and drives you forward. But actually, without the ability to deal with negative emotions and to understand them and to have them in our life, we don't have that rudder and we can just go off, you know, at a tangent. So I love that idea of negativity is not necessarily a bad thing. Our ability to cope with the negativity in a positive way by building resilience, by building hope, by building all those things is what really makes them powerful. So positive psychology is not just about the good. It's about knowing how to deal with the bad as well. So, you know, that, and that's really important in our current times. So the second part that I want to talk about, and I'm going to zip through, and I do apologize that this is a lot of information, I realize, but I think, you know, as with any of these things, the idea is that I'm planting seeds and that you're able to go away to build your model based on the science behind this, and to have a look at this again, percolate your thinking, and to embed it in your school environment. So the second part I want to look at in the PERMA model is engagement. And this is around this whole idea of thinking about thinking, finding our flow, you know, place, you know, leveraging our personal strengths, you know, understanding what performance looks like, understanding what the zone of proximal development is. And I think the reason I want to talk about this now is because, and I'm going to go back to that whole idea of stress again. You are bringing students back into school, and you're bringing teachers back into school who are at heightened levels of anxiety. We know what that means. It means that cognitively that they are slightly shut down. They aren't going to be able to necessarily cope at pre-COVID levels. And if you look at the arrows there in that model, the flow model from Csikszentmihalyi, is you will find that because we're anxious, what we can cope with has been pushed back. So we can't deal with the same levels of difficulty that we maybe could have coped with before. And the way that Vygotsky's model is that our zone of proximal development is going to be squeezed slightly. So the real risk at the moment is that we come back to school, and this is something you need to speak to your teachers about. The real risk is you come back to school, and because we are behind academically, we try and overload our students because we're trying to get them back on track. And that is counterproductive, because at the moment, our students are in a position where they are cognitively less able, and therefore they can cope with less than they would have had they not been anxious. So what we need to do is build their levels of self-efficacy, their ability to cope. So those the first 3 or 4 weeks of being back in school are going to be critical. Our teachers need to take it slow. I was lucky enough to chat to the head of grade 7. My son is in grade 7, and I was chatting to the local to the head of grade at our local prep school, and she was saying to me, the first 3 weeks is literally going to be going back over stuff they've done online. They're not even going to try and teach anything new. And she said, because we're trying to get them comfortable, trying to get them back in, ease them back in, and then you can, once they feel secure, once they feel like they're safe and they're coping, then we can start pushing that area, that zone of proximal development. We can start pushing what they can cope with, because cognitively they will have opened up, especially if we're doing a bit of the other psychosocial stuff that we're talking about. So I hope that makes sense. So in terms of engagement, understand that the area of flow is going to be smaller. Our zone of proximal development is going to be smaller, and that our teachers should just be in a position where we expect a little bit less from the kids. And for you, you need to maybe expect a little bit less from your teachers over the next couple. Let's ease folk back in nice and gently. Let's not be concerned about getting the curriculum up and running 100% from day one, because if we do that, we're going to collapse in a heap.
So Craig, I just want to jump in here quickly because I think
Awesome.
what we were chatting about is around, you know, that consistency, building consistency, and pushing people out of that zone of proximal development. You're pushing them into an area of fear because there's little consistency within that. But you're also outside of that zone of proximal development. You're looking for creative problem solving skills. And at this stage, with the level of anxiety, the level of fear that both educators, students are all returning with, they don't have the cognitive ability to be able to creatively problem solve at this stage. So keeping it nice and tight, keeping the expectations explicit, measurable, and deliverable are keeping those people within that zone of proximal development and outside of that zone of fear where they will need creative problem solving skills that they don't necessarily have at this stage.
That's right. Yeah, critical. And I mean, you said it again, and we're going to say it about 100 times more before the end of this. Everything we talk about and everything the message we should be sending to our staff and to our communities and to our students is very, very clear and precise around our expectations. By being clear, by being precise, by setting our expectations up front, we create a safe space for them. So,
Craig, what's the risk of us not setting the expectations up front?
So, Lisa, I mean, that's a really good question because, the problem, every single person coming back into our environment has a different expectation. So if we don't, I mean, you'll know and I'm sure as heads of school and as senior staff, you're already experiencing this. You've had a child who has actually done 110% of the work that was set, and you have a child who's done 10% of the work. And you are so their expectations are poles apart. So what you're going to have is you come back in and we have to set the tone. So we put an academic program in place. The child who's done 110% is going to be frustrated. The parent is going to be frustrated because the child comes home and moans about, oh, but I've done everything. We're just doing this and Johnny hasn't done this. The child who's done 10% and is now thinking they've got to be at 60% is going to be anxious because they're behind. So by not being clear and by not being precise, every single person is going to have a different expectation and is going to have some level of negative emotion, whether it's frustration or whether it's anxiety. So we need to set the bar. We need to be clear as heads of school to our communities. This is what we are doing. This is how it is. This is how we're measuring it. And everything you do, and we'll talk about this at the end, is everything needs to reinforce that. Your assemblies, your newsletters, your conversations with your staff in the staff room, your conversations with the students, the teachers' conversations with the students need to do that because that creates that safe space. So moving on to the third part, the R part is this whole idea of relationships. This is something you and your teachers are very, very good at. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this profession. Trevor, who is on this, Trevor Harbottle from Hermannsburg, they have a wonderful thing. Again, I'm using them because I'm working with them at the moment around this, is that this whole idea of connection over content. That is their rallying cry that they've come up with in the next thing is when they return to school, it's about connection over content. Relationships first, academics will naturally follow. And it's not that academics are being sidelined. It's not that academics aren't important. But again, if you aren't creating the connection first, you aren't going to be able to get the best out of your students academically. So rather than it being one or the other, my argument is that if you can establish a safe relational space, if you can make sure that the teachers are operating from a position of compassion and care and all of their kindness and love and all of those things first, then you are going to get the best out of your kids in any case. And when you get to December, you're probably going to be academically further along the continuum than if you had come in and try to just hammer the academics from day one. So a couple of do's and don'ts under this. Your teachers are good at relationships. Give them a clear set of expectations regarding the fact that you need them to care. You need them to show compassion. You need them to be kind. first and foremost. Communicate that plan to them, communicate that plan to the kids, communicate that plan to the parents, communicate it again. And like I said there, if I haven't said it yet, communicate it.
Sorry, Craig.
To me,
the one thing I wanted
yeah.
to bring in here, which was interesting for me, and as a business owner and leader as well, is that communicating the plan, developing the expectations, and what I wanted to almost add in there was like live the plan. Was as school leaders, as school management, if you're going to have to walk the talk. If you are putting in these expectations of kindness, compassion, connectedness, genuine care in your classrooms, as a school leader and as a business owner myself, having to live that. I need to be caring. I need to be kindful, as you explain here. I need to be compassionate and connected to my team, who are then going to deliver, and empty cups cannot pour. So as school leaders, we need to be able to deliver into those cups so that we can pour into the cups of our educators, and those that then can pour into the cups of our students.
Absolutely, Lisa. I mean, it's critical. And, if you look at this PERMA model, every aspect of it is built around relationships. And, and so, yes, live it yourself. If you as a leader are living this model, it puts you in a position of well-being. And, put that first triangle there, whoever you want to come and learn about how to deal with your own stress. If you are living the PERMA model, you will be sharpening your saw, as Stephen Covey says. So, and if you start sharpening your saw, then you're sharpening your communities, whether your staff, and as Lisa says, you're filling the cups of everyone. Before we move off this, and this is the hardest thing that, to me, the most difficult thing we are going to be faced with over the next couple of months is falling into the policeman trap. As school leaders, we are so worried that we are going to put our kids at risk. Our teachers are going to be so worried that kids are not 2 meters apart, and that they're touching and not cleaning their hands, and is that we wind up being policemen. And I think you've got to keep reminding, and yes, there is no way we can avoid not having to do some of this, but I think we need to maintain a balance. You need to remind your teachers that they are not police. It is not their job to police the children. Their job is to care for the children. And there are ways you can tell them to wash their hands, and there are ways you can remind them that they need to socially distance. But actually, the worst thing that can happen is that your teachers become policemen, and that they destroy the relationship they have with their students. So keep reminding them that first and foremost, it's about caring and compassion. And the policeman part is an unfortunate little piece they have to do, because they are going to have to do it. But we cannot fall into the policeman trap where our children are coming back to our schools just to be babysat while parents go off to work. We want to still be caring and growing them as young people, even in these difficult times. Folk, I'm very aware of them, and I know, we're trying not to go too much over. So I hope that this is all adding value to what you are hoping to build for your schools. So the next part is about meaning. And in the PERMA model, for us to flourish as human beings, we need to have meaning in our life. So the next 6 months are going to be quite critical for you to establish within your staff and within your school, why are we here? Why are we back at school? What is the reason? We're not back at school to be babysitters. We're not back at school because we have to catch up with the academics. We're actually back at school because what we do is grow young people. So how can we create meaning between now and December about why it is that our children are back here? One of the quickest and easiest ways is this whole idea of serving community. Creating meaning. We aren't going to be able to have sports programs like we did. We aren't going to be able to have necessarily the physical education programs like we did. So what are the co-curricular things that we potentially could do? I see a lot of schools doing, outreach programs and things like it. Those are great for creating meaning. So what is our why over the next 6 months? How do we create meaning for our staff and our students where they are serving something bigger than themselves? Because when you serve something greater than yourself, it takes you out of a position of anxiety. So when you are looking outward, you don't look inward into the things that are not going well and the anxiety and everything, because we don't want to ruminate about how anxious we are and how stressed we are. We want to be looking outward and being in service of things that are greater than us. Inspiration, pride, awe, all those things, looking outward. So my question to you is, what meaning can you create in your school program that would help your students see something greater than themselves or serve something greater than themselves? Now, what that does is, by having meaning, it gives you purpose. You can tie these into your value system at school. So many of you, and it's a great exercise, what is Shirley, I think you're on here, this whole idea, Stanford Lake College's thing is Ubuntu. We are family. So what can you do that attaches meaning to this Ubuntu? Going and serving a community, being family, serving your community as family. So what value system do you have at school that you can really harness now and leverage to create meaning for your students over the next 6 months? Because when we have meaning, it switches us into a positive spiral, takes us out of anxiety, and we are able to move closer to that position of flourishing. Of course, if we are doing something that's greater than ourselves, we heighten our levels of self-worth as well. And there's where pride becomes a very powerful emotion for us. So what does that look like for you? I've switched things around here because vitality is actually the last one, but I've put it second last because I'm going to use accomplishment to tie things together. And I'm going to really go through this quickly so we can spend a bit of time on accomplishment. So the vitality piece of our PERMA model is one that's, we've spoken a lot. And those of you who've listened to my podcasts will know that I've spoken about what school post-COVID, during COVID looks like. What is the physical education and sports program going to look like at your school? You need to have a plan. I know that the Department of Education and haven't been very clear in terms of what levels each are going to be able to come back at, but you need to have some kind of plan as to what your physical well-being program looks like. There are things you can do while you are physically distancing. And remember, it's physically distancing, not socially distancing. So what is replacing your sport? Because the 4 pillars of vitality are the physical aspect, the cognitive aspect, sleep, and nutrition. So what are you putting in place for your staff and for your students to educate them around the 4 pillars of vitality? Are you doing something at school? Is it that you having PosEd still, but that you're doing it in a way where kids can still do things? Are you getting them? Are you saying to them they need to be out there? They're going home early now. How can they exercise? Are they going to set little targets? I know that some schools have got these great little programs where they're saying, right, this week is push-up week. We're going to have a scoreboard and we're going to have a little competition and people are going to do push-ups and you're going to compete against someone else. Some schools are doing it against other schools. I saw Thomas More had a great little sort of cross-country competition that they ran, where they had to run a certain distance and time themselves, and they had a lead of what it looked like. How are we to maintain the physical aspect? The cognitive side of things comes in with the positive emotions. How can we build those into our school? And then how are you educating your students around the idea of sleeping well? Because it's hard to sleep well. Those of you, I imagine you guys as school leaders are having very disrupted nights of sleep. I know I am. Despite knowing all this stuff and practicing meditation and doing all these things, I still don't sleep as well as I did pre-COVID because there's anxiety there. What are you educating students in around this idea of sleep and nutrition? Because they are critical. They are more critical now than ever before. Because when we are anxious, when we are stressed, we start going for comfort food, the kind of calorie dense, unhealthy stuff. So are you educating? Are you building things into your education program to make sure that they are doing them? I've just put a couple of examples down there, things that you can do, maybe even at the start of each lesson. The whole idea of deep breathing, box breathing, this idea of getting get your kids to stand nice and upright and breathe really deeply for count, do 10 deep breaths, in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5, hold for 5, in for 5. Do that 10 times. Start of each lesson, just get them up, get their eyes up. The whole thing of, oh, he's looking down. Well, you know where it comes from? It comes from the fact that when we are anxious, our whole body goes down and we look down. If you look up above the horizon, it automatically clicks your brain into a different, switches on your prefrontal cortex. So eyes up exercise. Ask them to look up, identify things above your eye line. It's a really simple exercise to click people out of, and look for other things like that. Meditation for your staff, yoga, Pilates, all these different things that they could do. Aspect of this in the accomplishment. So if I said to you, write down what success would look like for your teachers in December, do you know what they would say? Do they know what they would say? If I said, what does success look like for your students? Do you know what that is? Do your teachers know what that is? Do the students know what it is? And the difficult one is, what does success look like for your parents? Because they'll have different ideas, and many of them, you'll know, have already told you what their idea is, success is. You should have been teaching, synchronously, or whatever it is. So my thought on this is that your success will be what you want it to be. But you can only measure it as if you put something in place right now. So you need to workshop with your staff what the expectations are between now and December. And then you've got something, you can put a flag in the sand and say, this is where we are. You can share that with your communities. You can say, between now and December, this is what success is going to look like. You can share that with your students. You can share that with your community. Because what you are doing is you're taking any doubt out of anyone's mind. And yes, there are going to be some parents who don't agree with what your version of success is. Doesn't matter. You are the expert. You are the educationalist. You will know what's best for your for your students. But the key is that you communicate it. Sit down with your staff, workshop what that looks like, collaboratively come up with this here in this part. Build a collaborative plan about what success looks like under each of these aspects of the model. Once you've done that, create clarity. Workshop it with your staff, chat to your staff, say, do you understand what we're trying to achieve? Make sure that they know exactly what it is that you want them to do and that they're all bought in. The third one, over-communicate that. Send it out to your parents. Let your parents know what it is you're trying to achieve. Let your students know. Take a step back, slow down, make sure everyone is 100% clear about expectations around your PERMA model, around your academics, around sport, around all those things. And then the last one, reinforce that clarity. Everything you do, your newsletters, your assemblies, your staff meetings, everything you do, reinforce that message of connection over content, if you decide on that. Whatever you decide as a staff, ensure that that's your plan. Make that safe space for you to use. So, last little exercise. What is your next step before we finish off? What is your next step around your plan? Go up to your annotate bar, choose a stamp. What is your next thing that you're going to do? Are you going to workshop these plans with your staff? Are you going to communicate your plan to your community? Are you going to build your socio one? Are you going to learn more about positive education because Craig's giving you way too much to kind of chew on in 1 hour and 5 minutes? Are you going to build a plan for your students? There is no right answer, by the way. This is for how you're going to kick it off.
Craig, I think it's amazing to see how engaged people are with, you know, building these plans and putting them into place. What we were talking about setting clear, communicable expectations and success measures. Maybe some examples of what those look like. I mean, I know in our organization, one of our success measures is creating a place where it is safe to fail, to learn, and to grow. And we have like a temperature check. So we have kind of a temperature that we'll measure, and those temperatures say, okay, cool, it's a low temperature. How are you guys feeling? Give us your temperature check. And it's a safe way of being able to say, okay, I'm feeling bad, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever. Giving the language and codifying it in language, it gives us the channels to be able to safely communicate. This is how I'm feeling. It's acknowledged and it's recognized within this environment. And maybe that's some of the ideas, and maybe people have got some ideas of how they manage and set expectations for what people deem as sort of fluffy or maybe not as tangible as, well, these are the results we want to see academically. How do we measure and set those kind of expectations?
So, you know, like we set expectations. I think we all sit down with our staff and workshop exactly what it is that we are wanting. And we set us, and that's why, you know, one of the idea is we're giving a framework here for folk. The answer is going to be, you as school leaders spend some time in your staff room now and say, this is where we want to go. These are going to be the way. These are our safety. I love that. You know, the temperature check. You know, what are going to be our ways that we do it, and it's going to be specific to your school, and it's going to be, you know, you're going to have different ways. And I think the key here is that you find your way, and then you hold yourselves accountable. And, you know, if you know what that plan is, then the accountability comes in there. So there's no one right way, but I think clarity creates the safe space. But everyone needs to know what that is. And of course, if everyone's involved in workshopping that, then everyone feels like they've bought in to the plan. So just to finish off, so your strategy and how you create this model, you know, if you put an explicit plan in place, and I'm going to repeat what I've said to Lisa there, is by workshopping this with your staff and setting clear expectations for each other around each of these aspects. Number one, by clicking off each of the PERMA aspects, we know we are putting ourselves in a position where we are going to allow our students to flourish to the best of their ability under the circumstances. We need to emphasize connection. We need to remember, if we put this plan in place and we do it as we say we are there relationships, we know it's relationships first. We need to highlight hope. We need to give our teachers and our students and our parents a meaning for the future. At the moment, our communities are crying out for some kind of meaning to what's happening at the moment. Many of them are in positions where their businesses are in, they've lost their jobs, they've all this. Our schools, and I said our position statement at the start, our schools are places for regeneration and hope. So we need to highlight hope in our communities all the time. We have these young people in our schools. There's so much for them to be hopeful about in the future, and we need to give them that. We can't allow our concerns and our anxieties to drag them down. And how do we do that? We do that by giving them these skills around these 6 pillars of the PERMA V model. Broaden and build, understanding the zone of proximal development, connection and care, linking the meaning to our values and to our strengths as schools. Accomplishment is by having that clear plan that we communicate clearly over and over again, and we understand how we are using the 4 pillars of well-being to ensure that we are safe. The next one is, this plan and process creates a space to inform and reflect. This is not something we put in place now and we revisit it in December. This is something we put in place and we are constantly coming. That's why we need a lead person, a champion who is going to be the person people can come and chat to. Who's the person who is going to be the conduit that the staff can go and speak to, can then come and see you as a leader, so that you can constantly tweak it to ensure that we are reflecting and keeping the model up to date. If we do this, we send a very, very clear message to our community about what is important, and it's humanity. It's about relationships first. It's about caring for that's why we go into education, is because we care deeply about people. So we send a clear message that we care about them. And actually, if we care about them, they'll be safe, and the academic success and all of those things will follow. And then probably to finish off, and one of the really important things for me is this whole idea that it's okay to be vulnerable. We need to understand that it's okay to not feel at our best all the time. It's okay to be anxious, and we must be able to talk about it. Our staff must be able to talk about it. Our students must be able to talk about it. Who are the people in your school who are designated as those safe space people? I know Hermannsburg have got a handful, 4 or 5 people that the staff know they can go and speak to. The students know that they can go and speak to. And again, those 5 will then speak to the lead person who feeds back. So you have, it's okay to be vulnerable. Send that message to your communities. And of course, most importantly, that means it's okay for you to be vulnerable as well. Who's your person you're looking to? Do you have a person, either in school, if you trust, as a school leader, I know how hard it can be. You sometimes can be an island. Do you have someone you can go and speak to? Maybe it's another head of Andrew, I think you're on here. I know there were many times when I was head at Stanford that I spoke to Andrew Cook about these things. I had fellow heads that I knew I could go and speak to, who I trusted deeply, who were great people for me to be vulnerable, because you need to have that person as well. Otherwise you bottle it up and you aren't going to be safe. So please, make sure that you allow vulnerability in your communities, and that goes for you as well. So folks, that was a speed version of how potentially you could build your, a psychosocial program for yourself. I hope it planted a few seeds. There isn't one right way. You know your schools better than anyone else, and you will know what you hope already. You're starting to think about what it looks like in your school. What are the conversations you're going to have with your staff in the next few days? What are you going to put a workshop in place on Friday so it's done and you can put something in place for Monday? But you'll already, I know, will have started formulating these. And I hope that this workshop has given you like I say, some seeds that are being planted, some food for thought. It's really given you an opportunity to sharpen the saw a little bit, personally and professionally. So thanks so much for joining us. It really has been a privilege to have all of you. So many of you I know are actually very good friends of mine. And those of you who are on here and are meeting myself and Lisa for the first time, it's been wonderful to connect with you. And we hope that this is actually just the start of a very long journey together. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Craig. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us. It really is a privilege, as Craig said, to be able to help and support you in creating environments that are going to shape the future leaders of South Africa, particularly coming out of something like this. It's in entrepreneurship, every problem is reframed as an opportunity. This is a huge opportunity, if we take it as such, to be able to build a positive cycle of thinking and habits in those leaders of our country. So if we take that aspect and the upswing to be able to say what an opportunity for us right now, I think it frames this very, very differently for all of us as leaders, as well as those in the trenches. Craig, I just want to ask you, there obviously are going to be some people here who may not be as adept as some other school leaders in creating these positive cycles, in putting in place that PermaV model. what other support structures are available to people if they want to be able to access you or any of the material?
So, folks, I know that one of the things, and there are a number of schools, I actually see some of the heads on here who I'm already running staff workshops with to help build. It's a 1 hour workshop that I do with your staff. So what happens, it's normally a 30-minute to a 45-minute setup with your senior management team. And then I run a 1 hour workshop that I run. And if you want to know more about that, then please just go. My email is down there, and you actually will have that on the emails that Lisa will have sent out already. So if you want some support with that, please just let me know. I am in the process as well of building an online video resource, which is about, it's kind of 7 to 10 minute videos, which speak specifically to well-being in school and everything. So I'm also putting those together that I will have available to get out to you and your staff. It's going to be, it's normally 200 Rand per person, but I'm going to put it down to 100 Rand per person. Coupon that you can get through us, and you log on and you are able to get your staff on there. So if you have fewer, if you have say 20 staff, it potentially will cost 1,000 Rand. Your staff can do it in their own time. And that is I'm going to be launching that at the end of this week. So if you are interested in either a face-to-face workshop where I help you build your strategy, then email me or let me know if you're keen to get on those video workshops, which obviously once you have them, they're yours and you can use. So there's those two options. Just email me and we can start a conversation around those, Lisa.
And amazing. Thank you for everyone joining us. Also, for when you head back to school next week, 1st of June, please get in touch with us. Let us know how it's going. If there's anything that we can do to support you further in providing those environments for your teachers as well as for your students, please let us know. If you've managed to implement some of the model and it's working or it's not working, or give us some feedback. Let's hear as to what's been happening in your schools. Sorry, Mandla, your mic is on and I can, sorry, if you can just kill that for me, that'll be great. Questions, guys. If you've got questions for Craig, we're going to stick around for a little bit longer. Yes. Those of you that want to duck off, I thank you again. It's been really, really awesome to have you on this session. But if you've got questions for Craig, questions for myself, questions for other people, comments that you want to raise, why don't you pop them into the chat? I can help just moderate those and maybe just direct traffic. But yeah, questions. Otherwise, thank you very, very much, everyone, for joining us. I will be circulating this. We'll be uploading it to YouTube, and you'll be able to see the video there. And if Craig's sweet enough, maybe we can circulate the slides as well. And yeah, so pop your questions into the chat function for us, if you have any of those.
For those who are going to leave, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful. And I hope that what Lisa and I've shared with you has been helpful for you in your schools, and as I know how difficult it is at the moment. We can get buried in everything with them getting from the departments and from SASA and everything else. And I hope this has given you an opportunity to kind of take a step back and kind of reflect on something that is going to be quite important for us moving forward, and in your personal capacity as well, to help you keep safe. So yeah, so please, those of you who want to stick around, please do. We're not rushing off. If you want to ask some questions, and then if not, then, and actually, Lisa, I think we might even be able to, depending on how many people stay, we might even be able to unmic folk if they want to ask questions rather than. I think maybe put your hand up first, and Lisa can unmute you, and we can ask. There,
I don't have unmutable facilities. You didn't give me the power of God.
Okay.
Yeah, you didn't give that to me.
Okay, so if you do want to ask a question and you're sticking around, then please just pop a question into the chat box, and we will then, I'll try and find you and unmute you.
So people are kind of asking just about the slides and about the recording of the session.
Yep.
It's going to go onto the Future Proof YouTube channel. And for those that registered online, we have your email addresses. You would have got the confirmation emails. We will then send out that link to you guys so that you're able to access it from there. And then you're welcome to share it with your teams, or if there are fellow school leaders that you know would have benefited from being here but just couldn't make it, welcome to share that on with them as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So Geraldine just popped into the chat there. He would like, or they would like to just take a conversation with you offline, Craig, around making this sort of thing accessible to underprivileged schools, under-resourced schools. So
Sure.
we can definitely connect you there, and you can have that discussion with them through that.
Yep, Geraldine, I know you can hear me because I can see you in color on the thing there. So if you just drop me a line and we can have a chat and make sure you're absolutely right. Please, any help I can offer for folk who need it, I'm very happy to do that.
Cool stuff. Yeah.
And I see. Okay, brilliant. If you, for any other schools who are linked with underprivileged schools who you feel might benefit, just please let Lisa and I know, and we will do our utmost to support them in any way we can, for sure. It's part of the reason we're here, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. All right, great. Okay, so people are just popping in the email addresses into the chat.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Folks, if you want, you can, okay, there's still 30 odd folks, but so Benita, the answer is yes. And maybe what we can do is connect again, we can have a chat about that, because so Benita's question is, would this model work in a children's home? I think one of the massively critical, one of the things about children who are in homes like that is trying to get them to get onto positive, into the habit of positive thinking, and how that, and it's about, positive psychology is about developing resilience, hope, all those things. So absolutely a very powerful model. As a matter of fact, I know that there are folks working in the International Positive Psychology Association who work specifically in this area. I may even be able to connect you with them directly. So yeah, please just connect with me and we'll have a conversation about how we can help you there.
So Craig, I've got a question. We're going to probably head into a bit of a blended environment. Blended learning models where some are online, some are offline, some are sort of connected online, but not really in a virtual classroom. How does this model look? Is it different in an online versus offline environment? What's different in application of it?
So, I think less is more when you're online. And I mean, I wrote an article recently about it, this whole idea of, I think that the nuts and bolts are the same, but I think we need to just be slightly less, we can do more face to face. So I think, the teachers who are delivering a product online need to just be aware that they need to just be doing a lot less and try to do it a lot more accurately. So the whole, so can you do it online? Yes. Just be, try and connect, try and make sure that the human, we know those teachers who have been the best online teachers are actually the ones who have had a very positive relationship with their kids pre-online, and they've connected much easier with their students. So you need to maintain connection first. We need to ensure that, again, think of those, how are you generating positive emotion online? How are you, what is the engagement? How are you ensuring engagement, zone of proximal development? We know online it's squeezed. It's the whole adage, that you need to teach half as much and twice as slowly is a really critical one around engagement. How do you create meaning online? Why are kids doing stuff? I think there's a real risk online that we dump stuff online so that we can keep our children busy because parents want to keep them busy.
Yeah.
more so than ever, you need to let kids know why it is important that they're doing stuff. So being very explicit about meaning. So, and then accomplishment, often, one of the things we can't necessarily do online, some schools are, but maybe less than most, is how do we assess? How do kids measure success online? Accomplishment is important for them to flourish. How are we ensuring that we're not just getting them to do stuff and then it's just going in getting filed away? How do they measure accomplishment? So there's all those kind of things that you can. I'm actually very happy to share the article I wrote around what PERMA online looks like. Share that with folk.
That'd be awesome. Renee, we just popped into the questions there just around extracurricular activities as measures of the vitality part. How do we introduce those without kind of rushing the process, setting expectations that might not be able to be delivered? How do we get that vitality part and the extracurriculars up and running in a safe, in a positive manner without adding to it? Because you might find that maybe there's some kids out there that they don't flourish, they're not particularly either adept or talented in those extracurricular situations, and we're adding to the mental load that they're carrying and the emotional load that they're carrying.
Yeah, I think that we need to, it's on different levels, isn't it? I think those folk who are very competitive, and who those children are, you need to create that space for them. To compete with each other, whether it's that example I was using about the push-up competition. You can do it in anything. You can do hockey. How many yardsticks can you do in a minute? And they pop them up. Those who are less competitive in terms of, and aren't necessarily sporty, the discussion with them, the why, creating the meaning for them, is the conversation about your own well-being, and how physical exercise doesn't necessarily mean you have to run 5 kilometers or do 20 pull-ups and things.
Oh, thank goodness, because
physical exercise
I wouldn't get that vitality portion right at all.
Yeah, it can include stretching, it include yoga, Pilates, all these things that are non-competitive, but the why is here's the stress response. This is how we can reduce your stress. So you're having a conversation about well-being rather than about competition. But I think you need to have both. I think it's really important to have both available for our students. Some will use both. Others will just use the well-being piece. Others will just use the competitive piece. But I think we need to make sure that we frame it in both ways for all our students.
Yeah, very wise there. Yeah, Erica van Zyl from Perez says that on Facebook we should look at the laughter yoga session. I think I'm definitely going to check that out. Definitely going to go check that out.
Erica, anyone who watches me do yoga, it's laughter yoga. So kind of. But that sounds awesome. I think I'll definitely have to look at that. It's
all brilliant. Your trees are falling over.
My children need to laugh. I do. I love. We do kind of this, and the 5 elements yoga and everything. When I try and balance, it's all trouble. But my children have a good laugh.
Oh, that's awesome. Great stuff. Well, if we're all up with the questions, I think we've got the majority of that done. Again, we'll circulate those. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, wonderful. So nice to see so many familiar faces and new faces. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely.
I hope that we have an opportunity to connect personally in the near future as well. And Lisa, once again, thank you so much for facilitating this and putting it all together. It's really been fun.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I think it just speaks to what we're all trying to do in terms of creating positive education for a country in such desperate need of hope and regeneration.
Brilliant.
Wonderful.
And thank you so much to all of you, those of you who are left. I forgot this, but I should have said this while everyone was on. Thank you so much for everything you guys are doing. In the end, you are the true champions on this. I really do take my hat off to all of you at the Coalface and wishing you all the very best as you go back into this space in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and reach out to us if you need any support in doing that.
Yeah, please do.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting now. I will circulate the recording to all of you. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Thank